Mr. Speaker, SMS Co just now said that if WP comes to power, we will not form any relationship with any union. This is not true, and it's ridiculous for any governing party to not seek good relations with unions when it's crucial for any government to work with unions and employers for the good of workers and the economy. What we are calling for is a key reform to untether the NTUC from the PAP and free up unionists to be independent advocates for workers in Singapore. An independent NTUC will be a stronger voice for workers, as they will be better able to fight for workers' rights without fear or favour. And note that I'm not calling for, I call for independent unions, not mindlessly confrontational unions. It is important for unions to work with the government of the day, but they should maintain their independence from the government and should not be subordinated to it. This will benefit Singaporean workers and strengthen our country's institutions, regardless of the political situation. And this isn't about politics, it's about getting the best possible deal for Singaporean workers and for Singapore. And lastly, SMS Co mentioned the International Labour Organization. ILO's Convention number 87 on freedom of association and protection of the right to organize stresses that workers and employers organizations must be independent from public authorities, meaning the government, and free from government control or interference. This is found in Article 3.1, Article 3.2, Article 5, Article 8.2, and Article 11. Instead of having a symbiotic relationship with the PAP, the NTUC should declare a symbiotic relationship with the people of Singapore.
Mr. Desmond Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe my colleague yesterday, Mr. Heng Chee Hao, has addressed the point about independence and respect for the unions. I would like to once again reiterate some of the points that was brought up by Mr. Gerald Giam. And in fact, he has repeatedly used the words independent and non-partisan. The union must be independent and non-partisan to be effective. That to represent our workers without fear and favour, unions have to be independent and non-partisan. And that they will then be in a better place to represent their workers and to negotiate. And then he also went on to say that to be able to better advocate for workers, they need to... he said that unions are trying their best to advocate for workers, but they face restrictions to do so because of the government and legislations. So actually, I would like to ask Mr. Gerald Giam whether he has personal experience or data points or even anecdotes to suggest that actually today, the symbiotic relationship between the PAP and NTUC has caused our unions or union leaders to face restrictions or not to be able to speak up without fear or favour. Because I would like to suggest that yesterday after your speech, I received so many feedback from many of our union leaders. And that's because whatever you said do not represent their experience on the ground. So I'll make 2 points in response to what you have just said. The first point I want to say is that the relationship between PAP and NTUC, the symbiotic relationship, is an equal partnership. Our union leaders are elected by the workers to represent them. It is not a subordinate relationship between the PAP and the NTUC. So that's a very important point I need to make known to you. And in fact, one of the union leaders wrote to me quickly to say that he felt that, where does Mr. Gerald Giam, member, feel that there are any restrictions for the union leaders to speak up? So I think that's the question that I hope maybe Gerald Giam can address. Maybe I can also highlight that, in one of the posts by Batu, so don't just hear from me. So talking about how the Labour MP and the relationship in the union, it says that the privilege of working closely with PAP MPs and cabinet ministers over the years as council advisors is apparent. Their involvement has been instrumental in helping us advocate for policies that address the needs of workers and improve their livelihoods. This collaboration allows us to shape practical solutions for the challenges faced in our industries. So actually the whole idea of this symbiotic relationship is not to control the union, but rather we want to be able to serve to listen, to be close to the ground so that we can better support and better speak up for the workers and better represent our workers in Parliament or even outside. The second point I want to address is about independence and non-partisans. And in fact, one of the union leaders, who is also in the Central Committee, wrote this passionately in his post after hearing your speech. And he said this, let me quote, "I'm heartened by the impassioned response from Brother Heng Chee Hao, and on numerous occasions I have discussed concerns of teachers without fear or favor with the STU advisors." And that's from Mike Thiruman from the STU. And he went on to say that as unionists of unions affiliated with NTUC Singapore, we have never flinched from raising our concerns and advocating for our members' rights, for better wages and for better work prospect and welfare. It would be foolhardy to think that unionists are not independent. So please have a care, give some respect to our unionists and union leaders on the ground. They have a mind of their own. They choose to be affiliated to the NTUC and to the PAP because of the results we have delivered, because of the outcomes we have delivered for workers, and for many years because every worker matters. Thank you.
Sir, I reiterate again once again what I said yesterday, that I appreciate the hard work that many unionists are putting in to try and speak up for workers. But what I'm talking about is not so much that the unionists are not speaking up. What I'm saying is that there are institutional constraints on them that prevent them from being able to really push forward a lot of the policies. Because if in the current setup where the unions are, in what I feel, are subordinate to the PAP, the unions will only be able to push through their policies if their policies align with the PAP's priorities. They will not be able to override what the PAP wants to do. And can I ask the SMS whether he can cite any instance where the NTUC has taken a public position that's contrary to government policy in recent times?
Oh, I asked the honourable member about his personal experience, data, and he has not been able to cite those. In fact, so whatever he claims, he might have read it in other countries. I'm not denying that that is your opinion, that's your view, but I would like to suggest that we do not make those assumptions for Singapore because of what other people are practicing or because of what you read as a theory of how unions can work with the ruling party. Our colleagues have mentioned yesterday that it is not uncommon that unions across the world are aligned to political parties. We have gone over the years, worked very hard to make sure that we built this Symbiotic as a strong foundation built on trust. And we are not about to give it up just because you have some theoretical framework that suggests that it's better for unions to be independent of the ruling party. On your point about your questions about whether we have policies that have differed from what the government suggests, I would gladly say that NTUC have been pushing for many policies that even over the years the government has not accepted, and we will continue to do so. The job support scheme is one very good example. Member Patrick has been raising it for 14 years. The government did not agree at the start, but finally they did. So, and maybe you imagine that these policies come from the Labour MP. But no, let me assure you that these policies, ideas, suggestions came from the workers, came from the union leaders because they best represent their workers. They know what they need. And our job as a Labour MP is to represent them. Sometimes the government will listen to us and implement it immediately. Sometimes it takes more time, and sometimes we differ. But that's the nature of it. But we'll never flinch, and we'll never restrain ourselves from speaking up or have any fear or favour when doing so. Thank you.
SMS Kopakun.
Mr. Speaker, I want to clarify the member's question about ratifying ILO Convention. Now, we do not ratify C87, Convention C87, because we require registration of unions, and that is to guard against what we call yellow unions. There are unions that might be acting on behalf of employers to the detriment of employees, and also to ensure that officers in the union were not convicted for criminal breaches of trust, because these are necessary to maintain the trust. The tripartite relationship is built on trust, so that there's trust between the tripartite partners involved in negotiation. And just so the member is aware that there are actually quite a number of countries that have ratified, but it might also be useful for you to know that countries like the USA and New Zealand have also not ratified this particular convention that you raised. Now, I listened to the members' defense of, roundabout defense of why unions need to be independent and all, and Workers' Party will or will not seek relationship with unions. I'm very confused. Does the Workers' Party want to build relationship with unions or not?
Mr. Giam?
Yes.
So are you saying that your relationship with a union is a transactional one, not built on mutual win-win and a symbiotic relationship?
Mr. Giam?
So I think the SMS is having difficulty seeing anything between the full dichotomy of the dichotomy of full symbiosis and full confrontation with unions. We are calling for a third way, which is independent unions with tripartite dialogue to work towards achieving win-win outcomes for both workers and employers. So it is this approach that we are trying to take. We're not trying to say that we don't work with unions at all, or we are in full relationship and symbiosis with unions. There's a third way in between.
Mr. Speaker, just a final clarification on what he said, because I'm very confused why the Workers' Party is called Workers' Party. If they are not really so pro-unions to begin with, because in their website, I'm just reading it from here, the website says, Marshall announces the idea of forming a party for workers while addressing the delegates of the Army Civil Service unions at a conference. And he said we can evolve a plan where we can create a political party whose membership is exclusively confined to members of trade unions. So the history of WP is to be a party for trade unions. How can you not be in a relationship that is closely intertwined when you want to be a party for trade unions? I don't understand where you start from.
Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to respond to SMS Co. The only reason I do so is because he made a remark in his concluding address on WP leadership. So obviously I have to stand up. I second what my colleague, Mr. Gerald Giam, has said, but let me just state some points very clearly. Number one, I reject, and the Workers' Party will reject Senior Minister of State Koh Poh Koon's comments on the Workers' Party entirely. And your characterization of harmonious industrial relations between workers, employers, and the government of the day as being something the Workers' Party doesn't agree with. Number two, on the Senior Minister of State's historical analysis of the WP, I think it disregards an important fact that more than 60 years have elapsed. And the political situation has changed dramatically and significantly. And this is not just true for the Workers' Party, it's also true for the PAP. But since the SMS is on history, let me refer to evidence of what I believe my colleague Mr. Gerald Giam was thinking about when he was talking about an independent NTUC through history, through the eyes of history. And I'm referring to a publication of NTUC titled 50 Years of the Labour Movement in Singapore, October 1966. NTUC's cooperation, not one-way traffic. At an NTUC delegates conference, Ho Si Beng, now Secretary General, reminded the government and employers that the NTUC's cooperation in the task of economic development was not one-way traffic. He took issue with government leaders, particularly the Prime Minister, for speaking unendingly of labour's obligations while hardly touching on labour's rights and major grievances. I would be grateful if the Senior Minister of State can raise a single example of where an NTUC Secretary General or a Deputy Secretary General has spoken out against a 3G or 4G leader to defend the rights of workers. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is the gold standard or the test. It's not the test. But this comes to the heart of what people see and believe to be a conflict of interest. And when NTUC delegates are saying, Majula PAP, I think people are entitled to question, do you speak for the party first? Or do you speak for workers first? So, So it is a simple point. The point is not about moving Singapore in a direction where employers, employees, workers, government fight each other to the detriment of our society and our economic growth. That's not the point. And I think we've been waylaid down that rabbit hole, and we've got to just come back to the central point that was being made by Mr. Gerald Giam. Party interests cannot be more important than the interests of our workers, and a symbiotic relationship doesn't mean that the NTUC is neutered or cannot openly speak out in the interests of workers. And I think Minister Desmond Tan has shared where the NTUC has spoken out, and I have no reason to believe that NTUC rank and file workers did not speak out. That is something I have to say, because I know some of them, and I have to say I have to thank them for their service for our workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I don't want to prolong this, but I think it's important for Mr. Singh to realize the fact that we are even debating this legislative bill today is a proof point of how the tripartite relationship that PAP and NTUC has endured for the last 60 years or more that allow us to make this bill a possibility today. So just because the Workers' Party lost the relationship with worker unions long ago doesn't mean that because we can preserve a relationship for 60 years, there's something wrong with a symbiotic relationship. Thank you, sir.
I'm not going to respond to that point, but just to say that, I mean, there's no question of losing a relationship in any way. Thank you.
This is a completely different point. SMS Co, if I heard correctly, indicated that the reasons for not defaulting to an opt-out rather than an opt-in approach for the CPF system was due to extra administrative costs that will be borne by the government as well as platform companies, and also the possibility of a diminished choice. Again, I'm happy to stand corrected if I misheard. Now, if what I did here was true, I find this puzzling. Because after all, there's certainly no loss of choice either from opting out or opting in. That's the nature of opting. There are indeed already government schemes, pension schemes, such as CPF Life, where opting out is the default. Now, more generally, I suppose what I should be asking is, are we allowing the possibility of some additional administrative costs to be the basis for us not ensuring that the retirement adequacy of our platform workers is actually made more secure?
So I understand the members' positioning to try and ensure as much protection as possible is given to platform workers. But I think having had deep conversations with platform operators and the platform workers themselves, the desire on both sides is to make sure that administrative costs is reduced, the burden is reduced, and choices is given to the workers. So, you know, from a theoretical perspective, you may be right. Put them in, and then those who want to get out can apply to get out. But the operators will have to bear onboarding costs. These are real costs. To put everybody on the system in the beginning will require system enhancements, put everybody in, making sure that everyone is onboarded, and then subsequently, if a majority or large number or whichever number may be chooses to opt out, there'll be an additional cost to out-process those people who want to get out. Whereas if you let people decide that they want to come in, then the operator only needs to do it one time and process the onboarding cost for that worker coming onto the system. And that's why in our construct, we disallow people from opting out thereafter once they opt in, so that the operator only does one time of onboarding and don't have to keep flip-flopping workers in and out. Opting out as a default is also a challenge, because some workers may then choose to be out of one operator or not, and it becomes very messy for the operators to track whether this worker is on which system. So I think for administrative ease and for simplicity of operating a very complex system with many combinations of workers' preferences and all that to begin with, we decided together with the operators and also the desire of the workers to go for opt-in system.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Just a quick point about the theoretical nature of the system. I would just emphasize that this is not theoretical at all. Systems around the world, public policy systems, including what I've just cited, CPF Life, along with the UK's nudge unit, have already used opt-out systems as a default, as a mechanism to encourage what is ultimately in the welfare of the individuals.
SMS Co.
So I call that a theoretical argument because if he takes the effort to talk to the platform operators, he will realize that the practical considerations and the challenges are real.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SMS Co on the bill proper. The first question pertains to the costs and how the costs will be distributed amongst platform operators, workers, and we know the contribution of the government, so it's actually the flow through which is a bit more of a concern. I think member Mariam Jaffa today spoke about how different platform companies have their own models, some 0%, and they'll charge platform fees and so on, for example. So there is a concern that for some platforms, there will be an incredible flow through of these costs to the consumers, others less so. Does the government have any expectation of how it's going to manage the situation such that platform workers, or platform operators, I beg your pardon, don't willy-nilly just proceed and transfer all these costs accordingly to the consumer? That's my first question. The second question is pertaining to WICA. My understanding is there's some concern about the cost of WICA for platform companies. As I iterated in my speech, with 3 months to go before the introduction of WICA for platform workers, is there some landing in so far as how these premiums are priced in view of the very nature of the platform space? And some clarity on that would be helpful, because it'll turn on, if WICA is very expensive, then one can imagine what the cost for the consumer will be.
SMS Co.
Mr. Speaker, I thank Mr. Singh for the question. Now, on the first question of cost transfer or pass-through to stakeholders, I think the thing that we think will be important to guard against any excessive cost increase or profiteering will to be make sure that the sector continues to remain competitive. As long as it's not monopolistic, there will be competition, and competition for drivers, riders, and competition actually also for customers. And when that dynamic competition takes place, each platform will have to make sure that the cost that they are prepared to flow through, whether it's to the driver or to the customers, will have to be something that remains attractive to them both. Otherwise, they will lose either the share of available labor or they will lose the share of the available market. So that's one thing. Now, but many of the things that we talk about, CPF costs, cost of CPF on operators and cost of WICA on operators, actually these are numbers that can be audited. So for example, if we know, because now all platform workers will need to at least pay MediSave, and those who opt in or mandated will have to pay CPF to OA and SA accounts, which means at the back end, we will know by working backwards what is the total so-called wage cost that a particular operator with a particular load of workers will be paying for CPF or their wages. And in that case, we can then actually determine the true wage cost for each operator and can audit and see if there is actually some evidence of profiteering. On the WICA costs, our engagement with insurers through the PWIN, the Platform Workers Insurance Network, where we work with, I think, 5 or 7 insurers to start with, their estimate is that the cost for WICA for platform workers will not be too much higher compared to currently the wage cost, the WICA cost for drivers in the logistics or transport sector, for example. It may be slightly higher because today there's no actuarial data, so everyone is pricing a little bit more conservatively. But I think over time, with real-world data, and now we know who is a platform worker once the bill comes into pass, the true incident rate of injuries and the severity of injuries being reported will allow more accurate actuarial data and claims history to be established over time. So insurers then will have some real data to make some adjustments to the insurance premium that they charge. And in a competitive market, if there are more than 5, 7, or maybe even more insurers prepared to come in, which today there are 26 operating in the employee WICA space. If a certain number of them also continue to participate in this for platform workers, we think the competitive premiums will continue to keep the market viable in terms of cost to operators. And again, that part of the cost is also auditable to determine how much it does cost operators to put forth WICA compensations. Now, a lot of people may think that WICA is charged on a per individual basis, But actually, the insurers look at this as a total wage cost basis. So it is based on what the company is paying in terms of wages to their workers, and the premium is calculated as such. So it's actually irrelevant how many platform workers actually work for a particular platform company. It is more relevant to how much they're actually paying for the cost of wages to these workers that determines the weaker cost that they pay in terms of premium. So I think we should probably give the market some time to come to an equilibrium, but the initial sensing from the insurers is that it will be not excessively much higher compared to what WICA is today for employees of the same sector.
Mr. Chris D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very carefully to what Mr. Gerald Giam had to say. And my understanding is if the Workers' Party becomes the government of the day, then we, the Workers' Party, according to Mr. Gerald Giam, will partner unions. Yet, Mr. Giam says you do not want NTUC to be tethered to the government or the PAP. Okay? I don't think you can have your cake and eat it. Right? We don't use the words tether. We use the words partnership, alliance, solidarity, and equal partnership. We don't use the words tether. Point number one. Point number two about Mr. Gerald Giam's insinuations is that there's a suggestion that NTUC is subordinate to the PAP's interests when it comes to labor movement, negotiations, and trajectories. This is completely inaccurate. And let me share with you my personal experience. In the middle of COVID-19, we had multiple difficulties with the occupancy rate in hotels, right? So I was, had the privilege of being an advisor to FDAWU, the Food, Drink and Allied Workers Union, and they were down 1/4 occupancy rate, half occupancy rate. We met with them multiple times. And never in the meetings was there a subordinate and elder relationship. It was about how we get our workers in their jobs through the pandemic, secure, and get Singapore's economy afloat. We worked hand in hand in solidarity. Point number two. So on 2 points, I disagree with the Honourable Member, Mr. Gerald Giam, from personal experience. Number three, where was the partnership between PAP and the NTUC formed? It was in the crucible of fire. We were fighting the communists. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew represented the Postal Workers Union. And why shouldn't we rely on such trust, solidarity, mutual respect, equality, mutual relationship in advancing Singapore's cause? Why unravel that? It makes no sense except if you dissect Mr. Giam's position as being completely political. So woe to those who disregard the past, especially if they seek to lead the future. Thank you.
So I'll be quick. When I say tether or untether, what I mean is that the NTUC and the PAP should be separate independent organizations and should not be pledging symbiosis with each other. That's all I mean. And about this, what he says is not a subordinate relationship. Can I ask the member, why is there then a need for, in the case of this platform workers bill, why is there a need for the platform work associations to have a council of advisors which has the power to dismiss the executive council? And why are these council advisors appointed by the NTUC, and why do they all happen to be PAP members or PAP MPs even?
Mr. Chris?
If I may, sir, tripartism is a bedrock of Singapore's economy. The employers, the government, the employees. Do you seek to unravel that? I've been an MP for a number of years. When I go overseas, people ask, why are your unions not fighting against your government? It is, it's a misnomer overseas. But here, it's something special. So my answer to the Honourable Member, Mr. Giam, is that please do not seek to unravel a secret formula, a good formula that we have in Singapore, which is tripartism, between the government, the employers, and the employees. And the only conclusion I can draw in my limited human mind is that Mr. Giam is making a political point, whereas in my humble priority, it is Singapore that remains the priority. Thank you.
Mr. Leong Manoy?
Sir, we have sat here and heard about the arguments about the independence of NTUC from the two parties. So I think it may be useful for a third party to come in and say a few words. Okay. And also to demonstrate that there is benefits of having a third party in this parliament.
You should, Mr. Leong, let's confine it to this debate and not start a new one.
Of course. Right. I think this is broad enough, yeah? Okay. First of all, I think I must speak out in support of Workers' Party, what members Gerald Giam and the LO and the other members have said. I don't think the opposition is not in support of tripartism. In fact, no political parties who aspire to run the country one day would not want the support of the trade union. Tripartism is a given. Everybody would want to cultivate that tripartism. And we understand, all of us know history, that trade unions in other countries, and by nature of their organization, they must have the political power to institute change in the country. So as a result, trade unions would want to be affiliated with political parties. And of course, the opposition, whether it's Workers' Party, of course I can't speak for Workers' Party too much, PSP, for example, we all welcome. We want to cultivate the most harmonious and the best working relationship with trade unions. However, I think the issue here that we are trying to push or trying to clarify or trying to stress is that the nature of the relationship between the NTUC and our government is more than what we have seen in the world today. Okay. It's more than the world today. For example, what I'm trying to say is, can you find another trade union in the world where the trade union chief is a minister? Are there any countries? Please, if there are, tell me. Okay. So as a result, you can't deny our impression. No opposition, few opposition politicians are allowed are being given appointments in NTUC and all that. So we do not really understand the exact decision-making process there. But from the structure that you can see from the outside, if the NTUC Secretary General is a minister or a former minister, and there are many leaders in the NTUC that comes from the ruling party, I think we're entitled to think that the independence of NTUC ought to be better than this. Thank you.
Dr. Tan See Leng.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I had not intended to participate in this debate because SMS is doing such a great job in wrapping up. But I feel compelled to intervene in the last couple of discussions on the role of tripartism. Now, I would appeal to members on both sides of the House to again spare a thought about the unique position, the unique model that we have, the very special model that we have here in Singapore. And in Singapore, we do things differently. We're a tiny red dot. We've been able to move, we've been able to progress so well. This approach is fundamentally built on trust, on collaboration, and a shared commitment to finding win-win solutions. Now, through our decades of strong tripartite relationship between the unions, the Singapore National Employers Federation, and the government collectively, we don't just talk, we don't just debate, we act. Together, we have robust discussions, we push back, we have intense debate behind the scenes. And when we formulate ideas, we turn them into actions, and we overcome challenges as one united people. And this unique approach is one of our greatest strengths. Now, take for example, for instance, it was just barely two plus years ago where we went through the crisis of our generation, COVID-19. When the crisis hit, the partners acted swiftly to address tough issues like cost-cutting measures, retrenchments. This is in stark contrast to many other countries where tensions flared. Our unions worked collectively with SNEF to share the burden, negotiating wage cuts, saving jobs. And the union, NTUC, even administered the Self-Employed Person Income Relief Scheme, or SIRS. This collaboration helped prevent deeper disruption. It protected not just our lives, but our livelihoods. Now, that is what is unique about our tripartism, that it works, and it is a very, very unique, yet a true partnership. The government plays a key moderating role, of course, balancing the interests of both workers and businesses to ensure that all decisions, when they're taken, they are made for the long-term good for everyone. Now, let me reiterate this. I know you keep talking about independence, independence, independence. Behind closed doors, the tripartite partners do not always agree. Heated discussions happen behind closed doors on many, many issues. The raising of retirement age, or even the upcoming workplace fairness legislation. I'm sure we will have another very intense debate during that. The leader of the opposition is really smiling at me. Say, you better watch it. Thank you. Yeah, and we are ready. But we all work hard. We all work hard to reach a consensus, knowing that collectively we are always working for Singapore's shared interests. And as I've said yesterday, not just for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, and hopefully for our great-grandchildren. Now, to quote Dr. Yap, Dr. Robert Yap, the former president of SNEF, he once shared an anecdote with me when I just joined the government. And I thought that resonated and illustrated very well. He said at a meeting with a foreign counterpart, the foreign counterpart commented to Dr. Robert Yap, the then president of SNEF, saying that he was lucky because Singapore's unions were weak because they don't strike. The SNEF's view, his response to this foreign counterpart's comment was that actually, no, the unions here are strong because they get what they want without striking. Now, this is the strength of our system. Our outcomes, our positive outcomes are achieved through negotiation, not confrontation, not open confrontation. So to paraphrase the late US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, do you throw away your umbrella in a thunderstorm because you're not getting wet? Now, members of the House, the lack of open confrontation, your so-called being more independent, doesn't mean that our unions are weak. It shows that the power of positive collaboration in delivering results without disruption. Now, I urge all members of the House, we are here to help our platform workers. We are here, and we have just finished and heard the wrap-up speech of SMS Co on how we can help our platform workers better, taking into consideration all of the comments, the suggestions, the opinions of members of the House. Let's not detract ourselves from this bill, right? So I hope that you do not judge NTUC or SNEF by what you think that the relationship between unions, employers, and the government should be. But look at the record, look at the outcomes, the positive outcomes that the Tripartism has delivered for Singapore through the decades. Together, we've protected jobs, we've created stability, we've ensured prosperity for our workers, our businesses. I hope we can continue. We can continue to use this platform to support, sustain tripartism as our competitive advantage. Because by working hand in hand, we're not just navigating today's challenges, we are also securing a better, a brighter, a more secure future for Singapore and Singaporeans. And I hope that's the legacy that we must preserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.